Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast Magic is Real. I'm Shannon. I am your host. And this is the podcast where we talk about spiritually transformative experiences such as near death experiences, out of body experiences, consciousness, spirituality in general, and all things metaphysical. I am happy to have with me today Holly Duckworth, who I've had on the show before, and we had a really fascinating conversation that I highly recommend you check out. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Holly's work, and then she's going to tell you about it firsthand. So, Holly helps release subconscious limitations for spiritual seekers so that they can experience an exquisite life. With a focus on holistic mental health, Holly is certified at the highest level as a practitioner of quantum healing hypnosis technique, QHHT, a hypnosis modality which integrates spiritual, physical, and emotional healing. Holly was trained by Dolores Cannon and has achieved her top level certification, practicing for over 10 years. She is devoted to practicing exactly as Dolores did. That's all I'm going to say for now because I would really like for Holly to tell you more about herself. But what I also am just going to ask you, you reached out to me and you said, I have this idea for another episode. And I was so excited because this stuff is right up my alley. So I'd like you to tell our listeners what it is that you suggested we talk about, and
Yeah.
then I'll have you kind of talk a little bit more about your work.
Thanks, Shannon. I'm so happy to be here again with you. Love
Me
it, love it. And
too.
I love that the magic is real because absolutely it is.
Yeah, that's why I'm excited. I've been seeing it all week,
Mhm.
synchronicities everywhere, these
Uh-huh.
amazing spirit things happening, and so it
Yeah.
couldn't be better timing. So yeah,
Yeah.
tell me about what. So Holly, what did you want to talk to me about today?
So I want to talk to to you and share with your audience about just these ideas to tap into our subconscious mind. And like you said, I practiced quantum healing hypnosis technique. And so in hypnosis, of course, we're accessing not only the subconscious mind, but in Dolores Cannon's methodology, we access the higher self. So it's a particularly profound state of trance. But even in a more ordinary state of trance, we have the ability to find out so much more about ourselves and our limitations just by looking at the subconscious mind. So, in addition to QHHT, I've been adding some modalities to my work and just finding some amazing results in terms of maybe I'll say easier access, although QHHT is easy to access, but QHHT is intense. One QHHT session is 5 to 7 hours. So I spend all day with one client. And it is profound and it is life-changing and it is amazing. And and people wait for months and months to get in to see me for their QHHT session. And for most of us level 3 practitioners, it's months in advance. And so I wanted to find other ways that people could help themselves crack into that subconscious mind, release subconscious limitations while they're waiting for their QHHT session. So that's what I want to talk about, all the different ways you and your audience can access the subconscious mind in ways that give you freedom, that give you mental health, that give you um, power and empowerment, and really examining the subconscious mind helps us understand our beliefs, and it's often our beliefs that are holding us back.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that because yeah, vibration, intention, words have power, manifestation, all of that is super important to me. And it's something that I really try to be conscious of. So, really just kind of just tell us wherever you want to start from, anything you want to about that, and
Okay.
how we do that and what's holding us back.
Okay, so beliefs are generally holding us back. And I kept hearing this from the higher self in QHHT sessions. Oh, she needs to change her beliefs. Oh, she needs to change her beliefs about that. Oh, she needs to change her beliefs about that. And so then, of course, my next question, the higher self, is does she know how to do that? No. Well, then how does she learn how to do that? And so through QHHT, I have this profound wisdom coming at me spontaneously from the higher self to help me understand how do you do that? And of course, like with anything, with any growth or healing, the very first thing we have to address is our awareness of the situation. Okay. So we have to become aware of the subconscious beliefs that are holding us back. Okay. So let's get some examples going here. Okay. Because that's always the best way to learn. So, one example that I see very, very often is someone might be on a spiritual journey, on a spiritual path. Usually it's a woman, and usually it's a woman about my age. So, we won't have to espouse numbers, but someone of a certain age who might have adult children. Okay. Um, who says that they're ready to invest in themselves. They want to invest in themselves. They're ready to grow. They want to find the new them, right? They want to find the healed them. And then they do everything. They go right up to the line of maybe investing a little bit in themselves, but they don't invest fully in themselves. Okay, so they won't well, I could spend that money on my daughter, or that's too much money to spend on myself. And so this is a subconscious belief about worthiness, right? So we can take our actions, our decisions, and our actions, and we can reverse engineer them to understand our subconscious beliefs. So in this example, I have, let's say, a 55-year-old woman who is newly awakened, on the path, watching all the YouTube videos, signing up for all of the free stuff. And then it comes down to the line of, are you going to have a session? Or are you going to, go to this ceremony or that retreat, or really invest, like real money on themselves? And then they find every excuse in the book of how they either can't come up with the funds, or they might have the funds, but it should be used for that person and that person and that person, anyone except for themselves. And so this is a subconscious belief about worthiness. So we can take, it's just one example of how we can take our own actions, reverse engineer them to see our subconscious beliefs. Okay. Let me give you another example. Okay. Again, real world examples from my clients, and the higher self has said, this is his or her belief, and it needs to change. Okay. So another situation where a person has been put into a situation, let's say a spiritually awakened person, they've done their work, they've done their meditation, they've done their inner work, they have invested in themselves, they've gone through their healing process, and they get faced with a situation, let's say, of a parent in near the end of their life, near the end of their natural life. Okay. Maybe it's a situation with cancer or heart disease or something like that. And what I've seen over and over again is clients will they'll work with the medical establishment to spend unconscionable resources to keep that parent alive as long as possible, right? Pull out all the stops, right? This treatment and this surgery and that surgery, and then that medicine and this medicine, and trying desperately to keep their parent alive, even to the point where I've had one client who, after learning her lesson the hard way, her parent had to have a talk with her to say, please let me die. Because the daughter was so intent on throwing every possible remedy at the parent to keep them alive. And yet, here's someone who says all of the things about understanding dimensionality and multidimensionality and life after death and yada, yada, yada. But their actions tell us something else, that they really fear death, right? Because they won't let their parent die. They won't let their parent go. So yet another example of how we can study our decisions and our actions to go, there's some subconscious, this individual is not aware. If you asked her, you could have a 3-hour conversation with her, and she would be very comfortable with death, very comfortable with understanding what's next, very comfortable with understanding NDEs consciously. But we can study her actions to say, no, sorry, sister girl, there's still some subconscious beliefs there in your fear of death.
Yeah,
That makes sense. So,
it
so, so
does.
we can espouse all we want, but our actions tell the truth.
Oh, yeah, that's so true. I think there's so many things that we do based on programming from our formative years.
Mhm.
Some of it we're very, very aware of. I know I act this way because this happened in my childhood. But then there are things that are so subconscious that sometimes it even takes decades for you to realize it.
Mhm.
And you're like, wait a minute. Oh, now I know why this pattern keeps happening. It's
Mhm.
because there's this subconscious belief that I'm not worthy. I'm not a person who makes money. I
Mhm.
always am unlucky in love. My
Right.
health is poor. Any of
Right.
those things become, and this is something that I learned in the 12-step program for sex and love addiction. Step 4, which I love the most, is that that is the step where you list out all your quote unquote resentments, and it just is like, okay, this person did this to me, or I feel negative about this government or the institution. And
Mhm.
then you write down, well, why do I have this resentment? Because it is something that threatened my livelihood, my sense of safety, my sense of self-worth. But at the end, you come to what negative core belief did that instill in you? So this is a
Mhm.
conscious process of
Mhm.
looking at your patterns and saying, oh, well, that made me feel unlovable or that made me feel
Mhm.
unworthy. And then we turn it into something that is going to empower us instead. So
Mhm.
if my thing was always, I'm a people pleaser, I don't stand up for myself. And after writing 75 resentments, which I didn't even think I had them. My
Mhm.
sponsor was like, dig deep. I'm like, no, no, I'm not mad at my parent. I don't have anything. I don't hold grudge. It's not about holding grudges. It's just acknowledge where something might have affected you, whether it was it wasn't malicious, but you
Right.
learned something. And then you turn it around and say, I use my voice. I always speak up for myself. And what I found after writing 75 of these was everything that's pretty much, not every, but most things that have happened to me that have been hurtful or traumatic, my part in it was that I had this belief that that's all I deserved or that's what I deserved. And so I kept
Mhm.
perpetuating it in my
Mhm.
interrelational dynamics. So,
Mhm.
anything you want to say to that? That was
Yeah.
kind of a long-winded way of saying that yes, sometimes unless you're intentional about digging deep, you may not even be like, "Oh, I know I'm a people pleaser, but I didn't realize how this affected every area of my life."
Right. Right. Absolutely. And I love the element that you brought in there too, Shannon, because and this is this is really true, unfortunately, with a lot of people on the spiritual path, which is oh, it's it's shadows of religion coming into spirituality, and it's like, oh, and that is this tinge of shame associated with needing healing.
Talk
Of
about
this,
that because
yeah.
it's so on my mind right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and this but I've done all the work. But I went to all of the ceremonies. Well, I took the medicine. Well, I communed with Sister Ayahuasca or whatever, right? I did the things. And I puked and I said the things and I channeled the spirit and I did all of these things. And yet we still need healing, right? There's still brokenness. I found out a long time ago. Do you know when we finish learning our lessons in this incarnation? On our last breath,
No. Yeah.
right? Because that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of the gift of life is the brokenness to learn the lessons. And so if you say, I'm good, right? I got all the heels, right? Inside, outside, upside down. Um, well, then why are you alive? Then you're done. Be
Mhm.
gone. Right? And so, by virtue of still experiencing life, is the example that you are unhealed. We are all unhealed, and we will all be unhealed until the last breath. And it's okay. There should be absolutely no shame in that. It is the human experience. And the healing aspect of that, the changing of beliefs, the examining of beliefs, the becoming aware of new levels of potential of healing, that is the point of the incarnation. It is nothing to be ashamed of. That is the gift of life. And so don't be ashamed of it. Don't have some humility. Know that you will be learning until your last breath.
I'm pausing because I was like, that's the clip. That's the promo clip right there. And I want to leave enough space not to interrupt. So yeah, that is incredible. I've just heard people say, we all do. We all do it. I'm so broke. I've done that a million times. And I've now
Mhm,
stopped myself and say, no, I'm not. I'm
mhm.
abundant. Like I'm abundant
Yeah.
and
And
therefore,
I'm learning,
and I'm learning. Yeah.
and I will continue to learn.
Yeah, the whole reason we're here is to be imperfect.
Hmm.
That's why we have free will. It's like, go mess it up, go make it messy.
Yes.
The messier, the
Yes.
better.
Yeah.
And I hear people say, I'm just broken. There's something, I'm just like this. I'm just messed up. I'm just
Mhm.
incapable of love, whatever it is. And it makes me sad because I think that isn't who you are.
Right.
And
Right.
and the more you tell yourself, well, this is just who I am,
Right.
you're keeping yourself stuck in a story.
Just shift those words slightly to say, I'm having a human experience. Aren't I lucky? You know how many
Right.
souls wanted to have a human body and didn't get to? You were the lucky one. So I'm not
Yeah,
broken. I'm just having a human experience. That's all.
exactly. How can we, yeah, what are some of the ways in which we can heal? I guess that's a pretty basic
Mm-hmm.
question, but in
Yeah.
anything you want to share?
So what are behind? So the onion keeps getting peeled. We go layers and layers deep. Okay. So step one is to even become aware that of your beliefs, right? And your subconscious beliefs, right? Not what you're saying, not what you're espousing, not what you were taught to say or what you think is the right thing to say, but really examining what you really believe. And the only way you do that is by reverse engineering your actions and your decisions, because they are so much more telling than what comes out of here, right? So become aware. Behind the beliefs, okay, so why do we create the subconscious beliefs we create? Behind the belief is a fear. And so we can begin to study the fears behind the beliefs, okay? Different people have different fears, but there are, in general, four specific, they're called existential fears in the field of psychology. There are four fundamental fears that you will have at some point in time in your life as a human. It's fundamental human nature to have. And at different times, one of these four fears will be more forward than another. And so when we go and study then the behaviors and study the subconscious beliefs, then the next step is to understand which of these existential fears am I facing right now that drives this belief for me. Okay. I'm gonna go a little sideways for a second because when we begin to understand fears, we need to understand that fears are purposeful. Okay. We shouldn't be afraid of fear. We should welcome fear, right? And so when we think about, well, why does fear even exist? The way I teach people that I'm coaching spiritually is that, we can basically sum up our human experience in understanding two major parts of our psyche. Of course, this is a really simple, easy simplification, but it's a good place for people to start. And that is higher self and ego self, right? Higher self is the eternal aspect of us. It's the part that's wearing the monkey suit. It's the part that existed before the monkey suit and will exist after the monkey suit. And then we think about the ego self. And the ego self, I use that term to kind of bundle up all of the animal aspects of being human, right? We're a mammal. We're a primate. We're a monkey. And our ego is that blessed part of that human, of that animal experience that is designed to keep us safe, to keep us alive, right? To make sure that we're clothed and housed and fed. I mean, think about it. In the animal world, humans are pretty darn pathetic, right? We don't even have fur, right? We don't, we don't even have sharp teeth, right? In the animal kingdom, we're like really, we got to do a lot of work to keep our bodies safe because our bodies are pretty pathetic in the natural environment, right? And so our ego is always on the lookout for risks and danger because it's trying to keep us alive. It's trying to keep us warm, it's trying to keep us fed, it's trying to keep us sheltered. Basic animal instincts to keep the body alive. So if your job is to constantly scan for risk and danger, then your language is fear, right? And what a beautiful language, right? So when we begin to unpack fear and these existential fears, we need to understand they're just a fundamental part of our ego self, which is just a fundamental part of our experience as a mammal. Okay. Make sense?
Hmm.
Okay. So the four existential fears are this, which we will all face, and they're behind those subconscious beliefs. They're the root of those subconscious beliefs. The first existential fear, of course, is the fear of death, right? The second existential fear is the fear of meaninglessness. Meaninglessness. The third existential fear is the fear of obligation. So, unmet responsibilities, because we're social animals and we need to take care of the tribe. And the fourth existential fear is isolation. Okay. Now, with each of these fears comes a gift. If you walk through the fear, you get the gift on the other side. Okay. So the fears aren't to be shunned. The fears aren't to be, denigrated. The fears aren't to be, I don't want that fear. Because there's a gift on the other side of the fear. If you recognize the fear and you walk through it, okay, you face it and love it, right? And so the gift of the fear of death is the appreciation of life, right? I mean, your soul was immortal. It didn't even understand how the potential for the gratitude of life. You have to experience death in order to really appreciate life, to have gratitude for life, right? Otherwise, it's kind of like a fish doesn't know water, right? Because a fish has never known not water, right? So your eternal soul comes into this mortal body to appreciate life through death, right? Through the fear of death, right? So the gift on the other side of meaninglessness is purpose, right? How do we really appreciate purpose if we don't fear meaninglessness? We need meaninglessness to create our desire for purpose. So that's the gift on the other side of that, right? The gift of obligation is freedom. How do we appreciate freedom without understanding that we can fear our inability to meet our obligations, unmet obligations, right? And then the gift of isolation is connectedness, right? How can you really appreciate connectedness if you don't fear isolation? So there are these, yin yang, duality kind of things, these gifts that go along with these fears. And it's these fears that then drive our subconscious beliefs that then drive our behaviors, our decisions, and our actions.
That's
Make
so
sense?
well said.
Yeah.
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 That's a really, really, it's the contrast. I just think
Yes.
of what Abraham Hicks says about
Yes.
contrast. And some people really resent that. And I've had people, I don't know, comment on my TikTok video saying, well, if there's a God, then why do all these horrible things happen to people?
Mhm.
And I've gently just said, I know it's hard to swallow.
Mhm.
There is a reason that our souls choose to experience the contrast, and then they get very upset. Well, what about this horrible thing? And I know I am not saying they are not horrible.
Right.
I understand, and I know that it may seem like we're just trying to. It's like religion is the opiate of the people. It's like that we're just trying to, and that person said, well, it sounds like religion to me, trying to,
Mhm.
and I just said, well, maybe they're not ready for this right now, or
Right.
you don't have to accept it. But
Right.
that is the very reason we're here. And as you said, life is so precious because we know it's temporary, at
Right.
least life in this body.
Right.
Life in this body and in this world is temporary. So if it weren't, we wouldn't value connection as much as we do. We wouldn't
Right.
appreciate what's
Right.
happened, everything around us if we knew that we'd be here forever.
Yeah. And let's go with that example. So for that TikTok person that says that, right? Let's
Yeah.
go with the example that I gave earlier of my client. Let's call her Sherry. And throwing, I'm not exaggerating, millions of dollars in insurance money to keep her 87-year-old father alive, right? With this stem cell treatment and that, immune suppressant treatment and then this natural therapy over here and that, and, so on and so forth. But yet Sherry is espousing, that she recognizes her own multidimensionality. She recognizes the eternal nature of herself, of her true self, and even recognizes that our human experience is here as a lesson, right?
Hmm.
But her actions say something very, very different, right?
Yeah.
So she can examine this situation with her father. She could create the story that the situation with her father is a tragedy. It's awful. The medical establishment is just garbage. They can't fix anything. How can she possibly be? Or maybe there's some sort of treatment she wants but can't get. And so she's telling herself this story that our medical establishment is terrible. They're withholding things from her father. Why did this have to happen to him? He was such a great guy, and he's in all of this pain and suffering now, and she's in all this pain and suffering because of all she has to go through with the insurance companies and yada yada yada. Right? She could tell herself that story, or she could sit in that situation and go, "Oh, I'm having this experience because I'm afraid of my own death. I'm
Mm.
learning the lesson through my fear of my death. Dad, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want to do?"
Yeah. I mean, I would say too, there's fear of grief, which
Yeah.
is no, but ain't nobody got time for grief.
Yeah.
We all are like trying to prolong it as long as we can. And that's totally valid because it hurts really
Mhm.
badly. And yet, like you said, there's such a pervasive fear of death.
Yeah.
Everything is fear of death. I think everything
Yeah.
is fear of death in a sense. Just the way that when we don't feel safe in the world, it all comes down to survive. Like we're trying to survive.
Yeah, that is the biggest one. That is certainly one that for most people, that existential fear is 2 inches from your nose for your entire life. And very,
Hmm.
very, very few people successfully walk through it. But I would argue that there's a whole lot of people, at least in the United States of America right now, who the second one is actually more prevalent, and that is the fear of meaninglessness. Because if we really look at drug addiction, particularly opiate addiction, there's a lot of commonalities with people who choose that form of self-medication to absolve their own fear of meaninglessness.
Yeah. What are ways that I know that you said addiction, meaninglessness in terms of saying, why are we here? What am I doing with my life? Why am I just
Exactly.
going through the
Why
motions?
bother? Why
Yeah.
bother about any of it? You know,
Yeah.
it's all junk. It's all garbage. There's no rhyme or reason to any of it.
Mhm.
Or the standard issue of, well, I can't get a leg up. I tried and I failed and I can't do it. And so why bother? Why try? And
Yeah.
so a very prevalent way of people dealing with that fear is to um, self-medicate, and usually with opioids. Alcohol too is a big one there as well.
Yeah. So many things are escapes
Mhm.
from that fear.
Mhm.
I do want to kind of delve into that in terms of, okay, so what's the answer? How do I get out of that mindset? I have another
Mhm.
question to follow, which is about plant medicine, which I want to get into a bit
Mhm.
because I think you mentioned that in your email, but also it's something I'm very interested in.
Mhm.
I'm just for now. Okay, so we have these fears and we're telling ourselves these stories, and it's manifesting in ways that are not serving us
Mhm.
because we're perpetuating more of that, the same
Mhm.
lack
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
more fear.
Mhm.
So, what are some ways that I don't know,
We
you help
yeah,
your clients, for example, with
right.
this.
And so it's recognizing and going after the gift on the other side, right?
Yeah.
So I was taught a long, long time ago that when you write a story, like the arc of a story, and that's what we're writing with our lives, right?
Yeah.
Our lives are stories that we're writing in the middle of it, right? As we go, right? But a good arc of story is to tell your reader about the alligators that are biting at your butt, right? And then tell your readers about the rainbow that's on the other side of the bridge, safe from the alligator. And then the last thing you tell them is the bridge of how to get away from the alligators and on to the, the rainbows and butterflies and kittens side of the river, right? And get
Yeah.
away from the alligators. So this examining our actions to look at our subconscious beliefs and then recognizing that every last one of those subconscious beliefs is driven by a fear. And
Mhm.
there's four typical kinds of fears. Okay, so that's all alligators, right? Alligators trained. And then, let's before we talk about the bridge, let's talk about the rainbows and kittens, right? What's the prize, right? And so the prize is living in a state of peace, right? We know we're always going to have lessons. We know we're going to be thrown curveballs our entire life and have to level up and level up and level up. But in those moments, we can take moment by moment, and we can even take the moments of leveling up, living in a state of gratitude. Okay. So the
Mhm.
rainbows and kittens and butterflies side of the river is living moment to moment in a state of gratitude. I am grateful for everything that comes at me, right? I am grateful for every breath and every moment and every person and every experience. Okay. So that's what we're after. That's the end game, right? Then we don't need the fentanyl and the alcohol and the millions of dollars of medical bills or anything like that, right? Because we're on the side of the river that's the rainbows and kittens and butterflies, right? The bridge is to recognize the prize on the other side of the fear. Okay. So if I recognize my fear of death, I've done all of my work to really study that alligator, all those decisions and actions and then subconscious beliefs and then fears. And I finally realize, oh, sorry, Dad. Making some really junky decisions here based on my fear of my death. What do you want? Right.
Mhm.
Once I walk through that fear, then the prize on the other side is gratitude for my life. The feeling of gratitude for life, right? And so I have to recognize that prize and feel that prize, know that prize. And then once I do, I'm going to desire that prize more than the fear,
Mhm.
right? Or let's say the addict who does all of their work, and recognizes that the prize on the other side is the feeling, knowing purpose, the gratitude of purpose. And once they realize that feeling of purposefulness,
Yeah.
they're not going to want the meaninglessness. They're not going to want to
Mhm.
feel that. Once you really know purpose, you're just not going to resonate with meaninglessness. And so it's about finding that prize on the other side and knowing that prize, going after that prize. And the prize dissolves the fear because now you're on, to do the yin yang symbol. Well, you were on the black side. Now you're on the white side, right? You just flipped and to the other side of the duality. And once you're residing and resonating in the other side of that duality, you just don't resonate with the inverse side. You just don't. Now, there's more to life. New things are going to happen. New lessons are going to
Oh,
arrive.
yeah.
New fears, new levels of subconscious beliefs are going to burble up, and that's okay. And you do the work all over again. You do the work all over again. It's just a process, and you can pull it out at any time for your own growth.
So well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems a little abrupt to take this turn, but I have the same mug. It's my tea mug that I got from I think it was from FabFitFun where I got mine. Yeah, so I would love to talk about the role of plant medicine in healing and helping us to recognize our fears, or whatever you have to share
Mhm.
about it that you would like to share.
Absolutely. So, when we talk about subconscious limitations, well, how do we access the subconscious? And for some people, they have worked really, really, really hard their whole lives for decades and decades to stamp that subconscious down, wall it
Yeah.
off, right? Great big giant cinder blocks, and then a brick facade on top of the cinder blocks, and maybe some metal grating on top of that, right?
Hmm.
And so depending upon how walled off the subconscious mind is, then helps us understand, well, what's going to really help us access that, right? And I've been doing hypnosis for over 13 years now, and that is one way. That is one way to access the a subconscious mind. Then you don't have to examine your beliefs because the higher self's just going to tell you
Yeah.
where you're going wrong, right? So hypnosis is one way. For some people, the subconscious mind is so walled off that even with hypnosis, it might take several sessions to really get into the depth, right? And in that situation, sometimes plant medicine can help crack open the subconscious mind more aggressively than hypnosis could. Because in hypnosis, you're still in control. You're still completely in control. You can allow to come through what you want to come through. You can allow to not come through what you want to come through. And in some plant medicine ceremony, you can't hold it back, right? Um, you can't edit yourself. You can't constrain yourself. And so for some people that have spent a lot of time walled off, plants, so I'm specifically talking about psilocybin and ayahuasca, but ayahuasca, I'm going to throw out some cautions. So hold that thought. But particularly the natural plant medicines, so psilocybin and ayahuasca are the most common. Um, those can be great tools for people to use when they really need an unedited, cracked open, a concrete block that's going on in their subconscious mind. Okay. Now, the caution with ayahuasca, I've had lots and lots and lots of people in my office healing from bad ayahuasca experiences.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a lot of really shady shaman out there. And now they're uncovering that some of it isn't even ayahuasca. It's God only knows what it is. No idea. Some sort of concoction. So just a caution for your audience, if you are going to use ayahuasca, make sure that it is a legit shaman that really knows what he or she is doing. Um, and usually that means traveling to Peru. It's probably not going to be in
Mhm.
Chicago.
Yeah, and I just want to also, just to be responsible, say the same thing, which I always do, which is psilocybin has been amazing for me. I The benefits for me have been astounding. And and of course but it is still it's plant medicine. And yet, if you have any kind of mental illness in your DNA, you have to be very careful with all mind altering substances, whether we call it a
Mhm.
drug or not. It can trigger psychosis if you are not
Um,
mentally, if you have any kind of mental illness. So please don't
yeah.
recklessly take it. But if you can do it with like a guide, a practitioner, a doctor, anything of that nature,
Yeah.
that's the best way to do it. I just happen to know that I did not have those issues in my family.
Mhm.
So when I say it's changed my life, I say that, but that's me. So also be
Yeah.
very, and I do, yeah. So I think it's a really interesting new way to, like you said, tap into that subconscious.
Yeah.
From what I understand, and I'd love to hear what you know, I can really only speak to psilocybin. Although I'd really like to try, go to Peru and do the ayahuasca thing. I would say that it sort of lifts, I just want to say lifts the veil. I mean, really lifts
Mhm.
I used to think back when I was an atheist, and I took them in college, and I thought, oh yeah, so I'm just hallucinating, right? Like all of this is just hallucinating. And how is my brain making that painting come to life? I know it's not real. It's not real. I mean, it can't be real. So how does my brain think that that Bob Marley poster is actually singing to me
Mhm.
when I know it's not? Now I fully believe and have had experience in knowing that it sort of it just removes what's always there, but you can't see.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And also even just for therapeutic reasons, like depression and things like that. I don't know the science, don't ask me, but it sort of resets the brain to before it was traumatized.
Well,
Before, yeah.
let me
So tell
speak
me,
to some of that. Okay.
please do.
So we talk about specifically psilocybin and ayahuasca as ways to crack open the subconscious to find those subconscious fears. Some other natural medicines that are very prevalent right now, ketamine and MDMA being
Mhm.
others. Um, so we talked about that, the alligators on one side of the river and the kittens and the butterflies on the other and the bridge in between. Well, we can think about the psilocybin and the ayahuasca as the bridge, finding the bridge in between. Okay, the exploration of how do I get over there? But some of the medicines are used for people to even know what the rainbows and kittens look like. They've
Yeah.
never experienced, they've been so stuck with the alligators. They don't even know what's possible with the rainbows and the kittens. And so some of the natural medicines, the psychedelic medicines that people are using now, because you can't really call MDMA natural, but
Right.
even though we do in the state of Colorado, it's legally called natural medicine. But anyway, an aside. Some people use that to even know okay, so the benefit is rainbows and kittens. I've never seen a rainbow. I've never seen a kitten. I don't even know what are you talking about? It's gibberish to me. And so sometimes those kinds of medicines can help people understand, oh, here's what a rainbow looks like. Here's what a kitten looks like in terms of dropping the veil to go, oh,
Hmm.
I want that. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just the beautiful things that you can see or the vibrancy of things or the mood enhancement. It really is, for me anyway, has been like just well, I'm already a medium, so I already receive a lot of information from the spirit world, but it heightens that for me in a way where I almost hear spirit's voice. It's like I hear them talking to me and telling me the things that I need to know, but it's in a
Mhm.
very gentle way.
Mhm.
It's kind
Mhm.
of like it's not it's all loving. And the way
Mhm.
that I imagine when we cross over, it's no judgment. There's no
Mhm.
judgment. It's
Mhm.
just, hey, be aware of that. Like you're aware of this.
Yeah.
And kind of this is something to ponder or think about or
Yeah.
be aware of. And I've had so many revelations. And I'm not even talking about tripping. Like I don't do that. I don't, I don't you can do like a guided experience where you really go deep and you might face a lot of darkness. I don't care to do that at this point in my life. I'm really in a great place. I don't need that. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm more of a microdoser kind of a person, but just the general opening up and expanding and releasing blocks that I've found,
Mhm.
just being in the flow,
Mhm.
just being more in the flow and seemingly, I don't want to false advertise anything or entice people if they're not really, because they might not be in a right headspace for it. But I do notice that it's like, oh, the manifesting has increased. The way that I
Mhm.
just say,
Mhm.
yeah, of course this is happening.
But Shannon, you're bringing up a really important point. You
Yeah.
preface with a really important point, is that you got to do the work.
Yes.
You got to, okay, so
Yes.
so you had an open up experience, but then you had to do the work to recognize, oh,
Hmm.
I had a block that was released.
Right.
You have to have that awareness, that self-awareness. Yeah.
Oh, that's such a good point because I think a lot of people might turn to that to say, oh, yeah, I had this really spiritual experience. Fantastic. And then they just go on with their life. And then,
Exactly.
in fact, I'll give an example. A friend of mine did It was, 5-MeO, which is frog toxin,
Hmm.
and at first he said and DMT, and he said, he's like, "I'm an atheist. I don't believe in anything," and he was suicidally depressed and, dealing with severe depression, and then took it and said, "Oh my God," he goes, "I realized that every grain of sand has a purpose. Like every little molecule, every grain of sand has a purpose, and that I am part of that purpose." And he said, "I just want to walk around yelling at everybody, 'Do you know that you are a miracle?'" But then the following week, he went back into depression. And so he
Hmm.
just kept doing more and more. Like, I want to feel that
Hmm.
again. I want to feel that again.
Hmm.
And telling, and then, was sort of like talking to me about, yeah, I don't want to be here. And the thing is, it's like you can feel that and know that there is that rainbow and kittens there. But unless you really commit to what am I going to do to heal myself actively,
Right.
not just be aware that I need healing, but also
Right.
what can I do modality wise, whether it's therapy, whether it's EMDR
Right.
therapy, and whether it's however you connect with other people,
Right.
you're just going to go back into, yeah, you saw it, you glimpsed it.
Right.
And he just wanted to hold on to it. So he just kept
Yeah.
taking more and more and more.
Yeah.
That's not what it's meant.
Instead of the examination that was
Instead
needed.
of the
Yeah.
self-examination.
That
Exactly.
reminds me too of this. Do you know who Terrence McKenna is? He was
I,
this famous psychedelic researcher from
okay.
the 80s, 70s and
Hmm.
80s. And he says he's on camera and he goes, "Oh yeah, man, I just had this great trip. I just had it and I'm still working through it and I understand this and this and this." And then the interviewer's like, "Oh wow, how long ago was it? Like when was this trip?" And he goes, "6 years ago."
Mm, yeah.
Still working with it. Still
Yeah.
fodder for growth. Yeah.
It still doesn't mean therapy's not, for me, 12 step. It's
Mm.
connecting with other people, especially women. That's been really healing for me in terms of I do women's circles a lot now,
Mm-hmm.
connection. But yeah, you still, that's what we're here to do, as you said. I would
Mm-hmm.
love for you to talk about just what you have coming up and what services you have to offer and
Mm-hmm.
how people, we're going to have a website link below,
Mm-hmm.
but please tell me anything you'd like to share in terms of what you're
Yeah.
offering.
So I got a new book coming out
That's what I
soon.
was hoping you would say. Tell me about
Yeah.
that.
So just it's a trilogy, okay? I didn't know it was going to be a trilogy when I started. And after I wrote the first book, Spirit told me, "Oh, it's a trilogy." And I'm like, "It's a good thing you told me now, or I might not have written the first one if I thought it was
If,
going to be
yeah.
three." So they got it. So the first one is called Finding Purpose, Surprising Wisdom from the Higher Self. And this is a compilation of over 400 QHHT sessions and the answers to what is my life purpose, what is my life lesson, and how do I commune with the higher self. So that's what that is. It's all about life purpose and life lesson as outcomes from QHHT sessions. What did the higher self have to say about these things? And then the second book is Finding Forgiveness, Surprising Healing from the Higher Self. And over and over again in QHHT session, the higher self uses forgiveness as a way for physical and emotional healing. So forgiveness for physical. In fact, my client earlier today, um, she had major back issues and 75-year-old woman. I mean, she had lifted some weights in her life, right? Um, Literally and metaphorically. And the higher self told her she was holding resentment in her spine, and they healed through forgiveness in her QHHT session. She needed to forgive all of that resentment, and her spine was healed. So, finding forgiveness, surprising healing from the higher self. Forgiveness is the route to healing. And so, this is a how to on forgiveness, right? Everybody tells you need to forgive, but have you ever seen anywhere anybody say, no, these are the steps? One, two,
Hmm.
this 4-step process that's a how to on forgiveness. And so, that's what that book is about. It's a how to on forgiveness. And then, of course, the benefit of healing after that.
Oh, that's great. That's great to know because I think that will make a great gift
Yeah,
for
yeah,
people.
yeah. Nobody, I know who teaches, right?
Yeah.
How to forgive. It's
Yeah.
pretty straightforward, but not easy.
Hmm. Yeah. People say forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about healing yourself. It's like
Exactly.
drinking. It's like if you're drinking their poison, you're only poisoning yourself.
Right.
And that's easier said than done when
Yeah.
somebody inflicted harm
Yeah.
upon you. Just say, I
Yeah.
forgive you. But it isn't about letting it go or forgetting. It's
No.
about healing yourself through maybe, I don't know, whatever, your book will explain it, but it's also
Yeah.
kind of in my book, the best way to forgive for me, and this is just something I'm sharing, is I really try to see through to the person. Hurt people.
Yeah.
And I try to see through to who that person was when they were a little kid. I
Yeah.
really try to go back to to finding the compassion for that little child that
Yeah.
didn't get their needs met, were abused, whatever it is, they've been hurt, and that's why they're doing this. It doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
okay. It is not an excuse.
Yeah.
but it
But
helps
then,
me.
but what I found in writing the book on forgiveness and is so these are the kind of there's three kinds of forgiveness, and you need all three, but I'll list them in descending order of hardness. They get hard, get more and more difficult. Okay. So the easiest forgiveness is, oh, I forgive you.
Hmm.
I'm so sorry. But we had this situation. I forgive you. That's easy. Okay. This next harder is, believe it or not, receiving forgiveness. Someone else asking you to forgive them and you genuinely forgiving them for hurting you. Okay, that's harder. That's actually a lot harder. And
Hmm.
then the hardest by far, these get like exponentially harder. The hardest by far is forgiving yourself.
Hmm.
Forgiving yourself for maybe being in that toxic relationship, or maybe even not having your boundaries to allow that person to do that to you, or whatever. The self forgiveness is the hardest and maybe the most important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the only one you really have control over.
Yeah.
That's, it's the serenity prayer and
Yeah.
kind of concept, and
Yeah.
also, yeah, we can only really heal ourselves. We can't fix other people, but we
Right.
can choose how we respond in some cases. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to share
The,
about?
so the new book, the new
Yeah,
book,
yeah,
the new book, the last in the trilogy will be done. Um, it'll be out in about 2 months. It's at the publishers, so they're doing all their
amazing.
stuff, putting it together. Is finding gratitude, surprising growth from the higher self. And this one really surprised me. These two things, gratitude and growth, meaning soul growth.
Hmm.
Okay. And how we can use gratitude as leverage to because I mean, well, like we've just talked for the last hour how hard this kind of an incarnation is, right? All of the things coming at us. Well, let's wring as much soul growth out of it as we can, right? Let's get all the juice out of it while we're here. And so maybe we don't have to come back or whatever. Um, the secret to that is gratitude. And so this book talks about all of the different ways to bring gratitude into your life in a way that leads to soul growth.
Oh, that's beautiful. You're doing
Yeah.
such good work, Holly, and I
Yeah.
love the way that you speak. I really thank you so much for reaching out to me, first of all,
Yeah.
anytime.
Yeah.
And for putting yourself out there to share this information and to look, I'm writing a book. It is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so I commend you for doing it, getting it done,
Yeah.
putting it out there. And I know that, and just being of service to people that in the way that you are. Are there any final thoughts or just things that you'd like people to know overall? Just a closing thought.
I'll just go back to the way we started. Anybody at any time can begin their healing journey with examining their subconscious beliefs. Your subconscious beliefs are holding you back. You crack through those subconscious beliefs and start to shift and change those, and you will recognize your limitlessness and your power.
Thank you so much, Holly Duckworth.
Yeah.
Everyone, you can find the link to Holly's website below. And I just was such a pleasure. I'm just so grateful that you came on today, Holly.
Yeah. Anytime, Shannon. Thank you.
Thank you.